We're recording our first ever episode of the Drivetime Podcast, which is the global automotive tech podcast. We're going to call it Global Auto Tech Podcast for short, but it's sponsored very generously by Keyloop, so thank you very much for this. And the reason we're doing it is to educate people that work in our industry, because technology is rapidly changing, and the latest statistic that I found was there are 9 million people employed in the automotive space.
Wow.
And we thought probably 8 million of them don't really know about tech or what it can do or how to use it. So we wanted to start the episode with the transformation that we've seen. You're both big tech or private equity. You bring a lot of skill and knowledge. So I wanted to tap into that and also what you've seen coming into this industry and also what we're going to be working on. So given that we're going through this huge transformation, tech is shaping everything that we do in all parts of our lives, from customer journeys. I wanted to kick things off and first of all welcome Tom and Harvey to this first episode. So Tom Kilroy, Harvey.
Harvey.
Well, no, I was thinking Harvey. So, and you can tell a story about that as well, which would be great. So welcome to the episode and just please introduce yourselves and the roles that you have at Keyloop.
Oh, thanks for having us, Jack. I am Harvey. I'm the CRO at Keyloop, and I run our sales and alliances divisions. So I look after our relationship with OEMs, our partner ecosystem, which is incredibly important to us, as well as our direct sales functions. I've been at Keyloop for almost 4 years now. Before that, I was at Google in their GCP, Google Cloud Platform area, running analytics. Prior to that, at an analytics startup named Looker, which got acquired into Google. And prior to that, Salesforce, also running their partner ecosystem there. I'm from the Bay Area, so Silicon Valley based. So that's really my background. I'm popping into automotive after being in like core horizontal tech for the majority of my career. It's been quite a journey, I will say that.
Yes. Tom, welcome.
Jackie, thank you. It's great to be here. I'm Tom Kilroy. I'm the CEO at Keyloop, and I have just passed my 4-year anniversary with the company.
Ooh, happy anniversary.
Last week. So joined 4 years ago. And before that, I was an operating partner at Francisco Partners Consulting for about a year. And before that, I was in software for banking. So it's a different sector, but it's got a lot of complexity. It's a big ecosystem. And I was at a company there for about 15 years. And before that, I was actually in healthcare, in GE Healthcare. So for a background in various aspects of those kinds of businesses.
I think all those businesses, particularly banking, they now look pretty on the front end, but still quite
Mainframe on the back end.
Mainframe. Yeah. That's the word I'm looking for. Very mainframe on the back end. So I think that's the transition that we're also in automotive. So when you both joined, you joined at the same time, following, and this whole episode was going to be about startup scale-ups and then major acquisitions, which you've both got huge amounts of experience in. So what were the biggest surprises when you joined automotive? Harvey, you alluded to a couple that were a bit of an eye-opener. What was the biggest surprise for you?
I think the automotive industry has been greatly underserved by technology for far too long, which is why Keyloop exists. It's why we are highly acquisitive and are doing all the work that we're doing on building the platform and an active data core and, knitting together an end-to-end solution for this industry, because you have this explosion of point solutions, et cetera, and like all the downstream negative effects that has on an employee, but also like the customer, of course. The other thing that's crazy to me is actually this notion and the terminology of double keying. I just want everyone to know that term doesn't exist out of this industry. I've never heard it. I mean, maybe it does, but I've never heard it. And that is just kind of like the cornerstone of the issue of like, oh, we have this phrase that no other industry uses called double keying, and like obviously you can logically figure out what that means. But the fact that everybody talks about it, the fact that it's mentioned in almost every single customer meeting I'm in, it's a massive problem. And even something as simplistic as like, oh, having the systems knitted together so that you don't have to re-enter data multiple times, that's kind of crazy to me.
You see it a lot, Tom, don't you? I know you spend a lot of time with customers, dealers, particularly who have this issue. Just talk a little bit about some of your recent visits and where you've been and what you're kind of hearing back in that point.
Yeah, I mean, when I came into the industry, one of the things I noticed was just how hard everyone has to work, right? People are pedaling hard just to try to manage the complexity. They've got to source stock, got to deal with customers. There's just a lot of moving parts. And as a consumer, you look at that and go, yeah, I know it's hard work to get my car serviced and these kinds of things. But then you realize it's really hard work for the people in the industry as well. I mean, I had a little bit of a taste of this recently with a personal story. It was like new people moved in next door to where I live, and that the house hasn't changed hands in a long time. So we were keen to meet these new neighbors. And they're a nice young couple. They just got married. They moved out of London. They're in their early 30s and they're very entrepreneurial. But and she said to me, I just crashed my car. Like somebody ran into the back of my car. I was like, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope you're okay. And she said, yeah, I was shaken up. But I said, have you fixed up getting a new car? It's an Audi. And she goes, I just can't face going back into the dealership. It's such hard work. I just got this car. And I'm sort of dreading the prospect of having to do it all again.
Yeah.
And that's awful to hear, right? Because, of course, getting a new car should be a pretty exciting thing. Obviously, crashing the car is never, good. But I just was really struck by, on a personal level, just how that reaction, I think that's quite common. This is something that people kind of have to gear up to face into, right? Which it shouldn't be like that.
You have to brace yourself, don't you, almost to go deal with the experience. There was a funny story. My partner also went to test drive something recently, and I rang him 2 hours later. I said, how did you get on? And he was still there. Really? I was like, what? I said, oh my God, have they taken your keys? And he was like, I think they have. So I was like, get out, seriously. So it does feel like we talk about digital transformation, but the biggest thing that we see, and I know we've talked about this, is it's the process transformation I think we need to really address.
Yep.
So double keying, when we talk about it, the need to have to enter data multiple times is incredibly bonkers, but it's still happening. And I think that's largely because there are so many different, some of them are mandated by the manufacturers and some of them are just solutions that you've kind of started to introduce into your business, but haven't really understood what's going on at the grassroots level, so how you can start to change that. So I know we're doing a lot of work in that area. But so in the last, double keying being a massive surprise, what's been the biggest shift that you've seen? We've seen things kind of go out and come full circle, Tom. I know we talked about that earlier. So what have you sort of noticed in the last sort of 4 years since you've been here?
Well, I think some of the myths that were circulating around the fact that all customer interaction is going to be online, for example, or everything's going to be done through Kazoo or equivalent, I think that's gone, right? People understand this is it's a physical product. It does need attention, at a dealership, whether that's service or test drive or all the other things. So I think people have gone back to understanding it's a properly omnichannel journey. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to choose a little bit different. They do their research online. They might look for deals online. But there's going to be a mixture of these two things. And I think that myth has gone over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think what we noticed as well was manufacturers wanting to sell everything direct to consumer. Great idea, actually. And that was largely born out of people having that poor experience and not wanting to go into the dealership. So I do think it's largely disappeared, but we need to provide the ability to connect up online and in store. So that's the bit that we're now working on.
Well, I think the agency model was a few things. I think it was about ownership. Like, I want to own you. I want to own your data. I, as the manufacturer, don't know that you, Jackie, I don't know you. I don't know your demographics. I don't know, why you're buying the model of car you're buying. And so I think it was a need to try and get closer to the customer so that they could understand a little bit more of what was happening. I find the agency thing quite fascinating on its face. Obviously, we've seen a lot of different manufacturers go forward, pull back, do it with different models, retrench, say they're going to try it again later. I mean, it's just like a whole myriad of things. And then you had on the dealership side, I went to the Automotive Retail Network, the ARN conference a couple years ago. And the entire conference was focused on how to resist the agency model. And they had one session on finance, one session on legal, one session, had 5 sessions across the day that were all about, hey, dealerships, this is how you can fight the agency model. No one ever talked about the customer. and the customer's experience, or like giving them a better experience, it's kind of like it didn't even matter in a way. They were so like just wanted to, we've been selling cars for 100 years the same way, and like nothing's broken, so we're just gonna keep doing this. And no one, I don't think that anyone really, I mean, I think the manufacturers talk a lot about like, oh no, we want to make it easier for the customer. But do you? Because then the handoff, if you do buy something online and then the handoff at the dealership, that whole thing didn't have any consideration or thought put into it or planning. And so it was kind of almost as a bystander, fascinating to watch that and still watch it, that game of tennis kind of continue onwards.
Yeah, it's been nuts. Tom, what do you think we could probably take from the verticals? You've come from healthcare and finance. What were the biggest lessons that you learned in those sectors that made them that moved the needle more, do you think?
Well, I think it ties into the point that Harvey was just making. So if you go back 25 years, it's really difficult to imagine that you could get a mortgage without going in to see somebody.
Yeah.
Whereas now, of course, we consider that to be pretty normal. Mm-hmm. And the way that that's happened is partly because they have joined up the sections of the bank that deal with the customer so that they can connect them together. But just to illustrate how recently that wasn't the case, I remember in 2008, I decided to do an extension on the back of the house. So I wanted to borrow a little bit more money. I banked at the time with Barclays. So I was on the phone with their mortgage people, and obviously I was an existing customer. And I wasn't borrowing that much money. And they said, well, one of the steps is you have to prove how much you earn. And I said, well, I bank with you, so you can just look at the bank account. And they said, no, you need to take your Barclays bank statements and take them into a branch of Barclays, have them certified, and then send them in to us. And I said, right, so let's get this clear. So I get paid into my bank account. You send me pieces of paper that show what my bank account has in it. You want me to take them into a branch of your bank and send them back to you in the mortgage center of your bank? And they said yes. And I was like, okay, right. Well, that is sort of a little bit where we are now in terms of we don't have a unified view of the customer.
No.
Whether it's at the OEM or at the retailer. And we really need that, because if you want to try to improve the customer experience, you have to join these things up.
Yeah.
So I think that the transition that industry went through is a little different because, of course, it's not a physical product. So there will be differences. But a lot of that is the same challenge, which is, do I really know this customer, and do I know everything they're doing with me?
So if you were a retailer or you were thinking about how you do that, where do you start? Because we've talked about double keying and there's data, there isn't a single view of anything anywhere. So how do we help retailers, business leaders think about, okay, we need to try and get closer to that. Where do you start?
Well, you've got to bring your data together. And this is one of the things that we've been busy building, and we now are in market with, which is an active data core that brings data from all these disparate systems into a single place, so that if something happens to either a customer or a vehicle, you can see that in one place. If you can see it in one place, then you can start to take action around that. And to some extent, it's essential because, like in the banking industry, a lot of it was about treating customers fairly. And we also have that duty, of course, in automotive. So if you want to see your customer clearly, you've got to bring everything about them into one place. So you need a central data capability, and that needs to be accessible in real time in all the systems that touch customers. And that is now possible.
Yeah, we're certainly getting there. Do you think, Harvey, we're going to sort of move on to the role of tech in automotive retail specifically. Do you think retailers feel a bit overwhelmed by the pace of tech? You said when you came here, it didn't feel like it was particularly techy. Does overwhelm factor into that, do you think?
I think there's a lot going on. There are a lot of moving parts and a lot of options. Those options are very disparate point solutions that fill a need in time. I think it's really plan the plan, sit down, figure out actually what drives value. And that is value for the business, value for the customer, value for the bottom line, and start there and just figure out how you actually prove out the ROI of those investments, how you can thread that component of your business together and focus in on that and get that done. And then it's kind of what is that saying? I like elephants, so I hate saying it, but how do you eat an elephant? It's like one bite at a time. Please, no one eat elephants after this podcast. But it is that. It's like, okay, it can be in anything, right? It can be inundating, but you just have to take it one step at a time. I think additionally, both everyone in the automotive industry seems to kind of move the chess pieces of humans around in the automotive industry. I'm in so many meetings where it's like, oh yeah, I've been in the automotive industry 30 years. And that is great. And that comes with like a huge amount of knowledge, but also like hire people not from this industry so that you can have diversity of thought. So you can get people that actually understand how other industries work and how other industries have tackled the same challenges, because other industries have modernized, have like jumped over the hurdle of technology and threading together their business. It's not impossible.
No. And I think to your point earlier on, Tom, about people dreading going into the dealership, I think as an industry, we have a bit of a duty of care to protect the great experience that you can get, because it's really nice. It can be great. And actually, I now quite happily sit in my dealership using their very nice Swedish furniture and nice coffee and while my car gets serviced. So it can change, but it just needs to modernise in a way that makes it feel inclusive and, you want to go there and hang out. We talk a lot about digital transformation. And Harvey, you've mentioned like, don't eat the elephant all in one go, try and do it one step at a time. What do you think good really looks like, Tom, sort of in your experience, when you walk into a dealership or an OEM today? What's the kind of so they've nailed it kind of a thing that you think we could get to or that you've seen?
Well, I think you're right, Jackie, that there are great experiences out there. It's just that they're very variable and people have very different experiences. When it's good, I think it's a combination of the people that you interact with and the technology they have to make the experience easy. So knowing whether the part's available, is the service going to be completed on time? Can I track where my vehicle is? Are you predictable in delivering what you say you're going to deliver? So you can have the car back by 2:00. And I agree. If you're going to work there, it'll be ready in 2 hours. All of those things are good. And I think the best situation is the way you see the tech augment the people experience rather than replace it. Right? You don't want it to be impersonal, but at the same time, you want it to be convenient and you want it to be joined together so that things don't happen unexpectedly, because there's quite a lot of that.
Yeah. So Harvey, Tom, you've both spent the last 3 years with customers all over the world, particularly with our car manufacturers, and we refer to them as OEMs. What do you think is the biggest focus for those OEMs as you've been around the world?
Well, right now it's cost.
No, that's a good point.
And efficiency. A lot of them are modernizing their back-end systems, which is a lot of like under the covers work that they're doing to make sure that they actually have the architecture, the tech stack stood up, built for the future, because it's quite old now. But I think manufacturers, some of them tend to go off into these like little tunnels, nefarious routes where they've decided to build tech themselves. And it's like, well, here's the thing. Like if that lead solution exists in the market, why build it, right? Like, why not just focus in on what you're good at? You're not good at building software. So don't do that.
No.
Go build cars and maybe the software within the car, or partner with someone that can provide the software within the car. But outside of that, it's really a data play. What they want at the end of the day is to knit together all the data so they can understand the customer, understand the performance of the dealerships, and make sure that all of that flows seamlessly. What they do instead is create these interfaces and cumbersome tools that the dealerships have to buy to then get the data. And like, we're in a modern world now. APIs have existed for quite some time. Data exchanges, data lakes, those things also exist quite easily. And so some of the OEMs are starting to go over the hump there of like starting to understand this and modernizing their companies, but others are still quite far behind.
So I think for those listening that don't know, so Keyloop operate in connecting up all of those systems. So the interfaces are the mechanisms by which the systems can communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And they used to be, historically, you would have this system directly talking into that system, so in the old mainframe world.
Yeah.
And what we're moving towards now is APIs that are like little automated pipes. And you can say, oh, I think Harvey's moved. Tell me that she's moved. And that system will then update this system. So APIs is the automation of how that data moves between systems.
Yep.
Is that the best way? That's the kind of way that I understand it. I think there's so much, and it's almost the whole point of the podcast really is to try and demystify what technology can do and then start to understand how to ask the right questions. And I think one thing I've noticed is dealerships, as we've alluded to, are really good at doing what they do, but they haven't necessarily used technology to drive that efficiency and reduce cost. So they end up using technology and then inputting manually into each of the systems, which is nuts. So actually, if you can automate that, I think the example I gave the other day was you wouldn't buy a washing machine and then hand wash all of your individual socks. And I've got 3 boys, you know how much laundry I have. So it's, you let the technology do it for you, and I can now set the timer so it does it overnight. I get cheaper electricity too. So it's things like that. It's learning how to pull the benefit out of technology.
Yeah.
So, Tom, sort of coming to you, and you've been on road trips again globally. You operate now, and we wanted to bring it back to sort of startup scale-ups. Part of your job has been to advise on how we invest or how the business invests in all of those. You mentioned about being acquisitive, and what that means is we've literally acquired a number of companies in the last 3 years to fill in the gaps in that technology landscape that allows you to do more of it in the one place. What do you think, in your experience, has added the biggest value to the way that we operate in the industry now, and the kind of, as we've started to bring it all together and digitize the whole space?
Yeah, I mean, so we've spent a significant amount of money. We've invested a significant amount of money in about 7 acquisitions since creating Keyloop 4 years ago. And the thing that drives our thinking on that is how is it additive to the totality of being able to join up the customer journey from being interested in a car all the way through to the, buying it, the ownership phase, and then coming back and buying another one. And so we've thought about the landscape of potential acquisitions in that way. I mean, there are other ways to think about, but we don't just acquire things just for the sake of owning them. Mm-hmm. It is very much because we think it is additive to that strategy of trying to provide a joined up experience for the customer. So that's what drives the thinking. And I'm very happy with the way those things are coming together. Yeah.
So tech and digital transformation are all, big scary words, and knowing where to start is one thing. I think in my experience, it could just be you do one thing on your site that makes customers want to stay there longer, or you understand where customers are going. We talk about media spaces, not spending millions of pounds getting someone to come to your site, just put it on YouTube, everyone's consuming, or in our case with TikTok, people are kind of going to those sites to get their information. So when they arrive in store, they're really well equipped with that knowledge. So Harvey, coming back to you and your background in tech, particularly Google, what I loved, and my foundation in digital, and I spent some time working for Auto Trader, was understanding those core Google moments. So what consumers are doing when they come online. And I think sometimes it's quite helpful. We're going to have Google on a later episode to talk about some of that and how you can go back to some of those foundational steps that if you're building a digital strategy with a consumer in mind, understand what those core moments are. Have we lost sight of that, do you think? And we've kind of gone ahead of ourselves, or do you think there's an opportunity to regroup and make sure that we get the foundational steps right?
Oh, I definitely think there's an opportunity to get the foundational steps right. I'm not sure if we missed it or actually it just never was there. Like, if you look at everyone, all the 9 million people that work in the automotive industry, they probably all have a phone, and they all have, I don't know if they've used Uber or they use Deliveroo or some other food meal delivery company, whatever name you want to put on it. And they do all of those things. They use the bank without going into the bank. Like they do all of those things. And then for some reason, it's like they get severed, if anyone's watched that show. And then they go into work and like everything has to operate differently there for some reason. And I'm kind of like being in the upside down. But I think that, we've invested a huge amount of money building out an application called Service Hub Advanced.
Right.
And it drives efficiency into the dealership. It drives cost out, but it also drives a good customer experience. And it has a complete knitted together journey that enables all of that to happen. And so it's, again, really stepping back and looking at the different components of the business of, okay, we really need to optimize our after sales department. We're spending too much overtime on technicians that didn't have time to do the jobs that we had scheduled, or, whatever, or maybe the bays weren't as full up as we needed and we were paying technicians to do nothing, whatever it may be. Customers were late, who knows? But it's like, okay, well, how do we optimize that piece of the business? And what technology is out there to help us with that end-to-end component of the servicing? And then you can start to actually assess the market, figure out what's a fit, figure out actually not what you need, but what gets you further than what you need in terms of an ROI, value, and customer experience. And I think that's really the focal point in on that stuff is actually quite important.
I think you make a really good point there. And I think after sales is one of those, it looks like the unfavourite child, but actually it's the bit where you can really build a relationship with your customers. So it's the one thing that drives profit for the dealerships and great experience for consumers. And it gives you the ability to sell them the next thing, because you've got me in the showroom, have a conversation with me.
Yeah.
Ask me how I'm enjoying it. Do I still want a petrol? Do I need to think about an EV? What does my life look like now? Tom, I remember when you first came into the industry, I watched you give a talk about the value of after sales. Full disclosure, I hadn't really thought about it. I'd worked in e-commerce and media. I was going after sales, like, why would you focus on that? But the more you delve into it, the more you realise that's probably the most profitable part of this whole industry is parts, distribution, just-in-time ordering, the bit where tech can make all the difference in terms of efficiency. Tell me a little bit about where we are now with that, because I think loyalty is the next step. So we've done the service piece, and then it's loyalty next.
I think it's really important. And of course, the car park that exists in, there can be ups and downs in terms of what people are buying and new cars coming into the market. And you do see some bumpiness in that at the moment, but people have still got cars and they need them to be serviced and they need them to be safe, and those things remain true. And so the after sales experience is incredibly important.
Yeah.
But that software that Harvey was just talking about, one of its big advantages is very intuitive to use, so that if you're actually working in the dealership or you're checking in online for your car service, you recognize the software as being just like the kind of stuff you use in the rest of your life. This point about the fact that in other sectors, people are using software all the time to make life easier for themselves. So, it'll take the workshop and you can drag and drop, jobs across from one technician to another. It'll help you optimize the day. And you're right, a lot of that is where a lot of profit is made for our customers, but it also serves a really important need. I remember a really funny story I was told about, the pre-digital world of selling cars. Somebody told me that when they sold a used vehicle, they used to put a little paper sticker underneath the hood, underneath the bonnet, and it would say, "We sold this car," and give the mileage. And it wouldn't be visible to the consumer, but they knew it was there. So the idea was, when they bring it back in 6 months later, don't turn around and say, who sold you this pile of junk? Because it needs a whole ton of work, right? So if you're trying, obviously, I think it was a real example, but the point is trying to understand what the customer's experienced before. So if you can bring those things together, you can make the ownership experience a really positive one. It builds loyalty. You'll come back. You feel like you've been treated well, and you need to be treated well. And it's really important to get that right.
Yeah, I think that's the, I love the whole 4 Seasons analogy, sort of get it right, get me right, and wow me if you can. I think that's the bit where data certainly can, as you gather data, so when you talk about buying things on your phone, you can book your service on your phone, you can do everything on my phone is my bank. You don't need a bank card anymore. Mm-hmm. So just thinking about data, your background was very much in data, and I think there's so much to glean from that when you think about Looker and data analytics. Again, I struggle with Excel spreadsheets. Don't ask me to do a pivot table. There's so much tech on my machine I don't know how to use. So I think if we think about just data as an area where we could potentially upskill, what would you sort of say, oh my God, this is the biggest opportunity? We're going to come on to think about AI in a minute, but in terms of data and just the richness that is there that's probably untapped.
I mean, Excel, to its credit, was like the first gen data analytics tool. Honestly, like it's amazing how powerful it is. I think it's very basic. It's get all the data together and look at it and figure out what it's telling you. Data is there to tell you a story. So what is the story it has to tell? And when I was at Looker, the founder always used it as a car analogy of like, data is the rear view mirror. You can look and see what happened, right? And then predictive is the windshield and like all of the dials in front of you of like what is coming at you. And then prescriptive is more about what are you going to do about it? Like, okay, so, need to slow down. There's a crash ahead, whatever. Okay, I go into automatic mode. I turn on the blinker, switch lanes, do whatever. And so I think the first basic thing is getting the data together and understanding what's going on in the business, and then figuring out the next step in terms of data of, okay, how do I then look at the data and get it to tell me what is going to happen given what has already happened? And I think that's where it gets really important.
So where do you, as a retailer or as an OEM, are they doing that at the minute? Are they looking forward, or are they just are they even looking back and looking at what's happened?
They're not. The majority of the ones that I've met with aren't looking back, but it's not for lack of trying. It's for lack of getting all of your data in one place and getting it modeled out so that you actually have, you could look at it simplistically of like, okay, let's say that I have dealerships in multiple countries and I need to make sure that surname, last name, and whatever it may be in Finnish all like map into the same field so that I can actually understand my customer base. Like stuff like that can be a bit complex if you don't have a data dictionary behind it. And so it does take some tooling to get the data in one place, make sure that the data all talks to each other in one succinct way. But there are many companies that are doing that and have been doing that for many, many years, and that can be very, very helpful in that. It's one of the reasons why we actually are, we have all of our hosting and all of our products in AWS, in Amazon Cloud, because that is the place where we can actually put all of the data, access it quite easily, help our customers get access to their data. It's also why we spent a whole lot of time building out the Active Data Core, because that is that data dictionary that then normalizes all the data for the customer base. So then they can start to actually do the basic analytics first and then move on from there.
That's a good point. So, Tom, just coming on from that, I think you mentioned earlier on about Active Data Core, and that, again, is something that probably most customers wouldn't really know what that means. So I think taking the data, putting it somewhere centrally, and then, so how does the architecture that's being built at Keyloop help those retailers that need to access the data?
Well, let's use a real example, right? Because these things can sound quite, technical or
yeah, exactly.
So a classic example of what Harvey's just been talking about is the service into sales moment, right, for a customer, which is you've owned this vehicle for 3 years. We know how much equity you have in the vehicle. Maybe your mileage has been a little lower than you expected. We know you're about to come up to a service, which is going to cost you a certain amount. We can present to you in a My Account space your options on what vehicles might be available to you now, that what finance is available to you in case you wanted to swap. Now, historically, of course, dealerships have been, everybody's running in their lane. Sales are thinking about selling cars. After sales are thinking about servicing cars. Actually, the consumer is experiencing it as, this is my car, and maybe I would think about another car now, but that the data isn't in the right place for that option to be presented to me. Now, bringing data together into a data core allows you to actually bring all the necessary parts together for that moment where you go, you know what, this could be a good moment for you to think about transitioning into a new car, and here are some offers available to you, and cars that you might actually be interested in based on what we know about you. So that at that point, I think you can personalize it. You can make it relevant for that moment. I mean, it's a little bit like, one more thing to say about like the banking industry is like when people get a mortgage, they don't want a mortgage, they want a home.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
They're taking the product for a different reason than the one that, if you were just thinking about it from a banking point of view. It's the same with automotive. We've got to start to think about, what's this customer actually trying to do? and what do they want to do next? And I think that's the power of bringing data into one place. You can make those moments happen.
Yeah, I think, and having the home and then having predictability around how much that home's going to cost you is really important. So you can budget, all of these things are in your thought processes as you're buying whatever it is that you need for your lifestyle. So I love the analogy of the iPod. It was like 1,000 songs in your pocket. And I think we've probably, with mobility, we talk about mobility solutions. And I think, again, the industry went in this whole full circle of, it's all going to be shared. No, it isn't. I mean, how many people have actually shared a car? I just don't know.
Yeah.
Apart from on holiday when you rent one, and it's just called rental.
Yeah. I did have a Zipcar membership for quite some time, but there was a company in San Francisco. I think it was called Truro, where you could rent out your own car, and that worked a few times for me, and then it went terribly wrong because I showed up to pick up a car for like a 4-day weekend road trip, and it wasn't there. And it had crashed. The previous person that had it crashed it 2 days before, but they never told me.
Wow.
And so this is like, the mobility as a service thing. You're like, well, it doesn't, like they had the technology, but it just wasn't that seamless.
Yeah. So the experience didn't really work.
No.
Okay. So thinking about future, then we've talked about what's going on now, and there's so much work going on to connect it all up, and that kind of comes out loud and clear, and we know that that's a real need for the industry to connect it all up and make sure it all feels like, we talk about full stack, which is there's a customer way in and there's a customer way of processing and there's a customer repeat. That's the whole thing. It does everything from help me to buy to help to keep me, within that brand. So what do you think are the big things that are coming up then? Any sort of predictions of what's coming in the next 12 months? Let's not talk about politics because that's, it could change tomorrow or by 5 p.m. So what do you think, in terms of your experience of what's coming next? Tom, let's come to you first. Anything that you think we're going to buy something big or we're going to just focus on what we're doing
what's
now?
next for us or what's next for the industry?
I think let's focus on what's next for us first, and then maybe what do we think about the industry?
Yeah. Look, I think what's next for us is we've done a lot of bringing things together, and we've done a lot of work on our data core. I actually think making that really hum in the hands of our customers is what is immediately in front of us, right? We're in market with our Fusion retail platform, and that I think is now capable of doing really interesting things just as it is, right? So I actually want to carry on with that first. So, it's important to stick to a strategy if you think you're doing the right thing. And we're definitely in that place right now. I think the industry around us is going through a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on it, partly political, partly to do with the transition to net zero. And those pressures are going to continue. And they're driving the need to find efficiency and to navigate uncertainty. And that is going to continue, in my view.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work still to do there, particularly around the efficiency space and the uncomfortable truth of technology is going to sometimes replace humans, that you don't need to have entering data into millions of things. It can automate and be seamless. That's the whole point. Harvey, what about you? What do you think are the big things that you're looking forward to?
I mean, I am very much looking forward to more usage of AI. I know we'll get onto that, but I think that is one of the key pillars to giving a better customer experience, both from like Keyloop serving their customers better, but also our customers serving their customers better. To me, it's not about taking out jobs. It's about optimization and getting the people that you do have to do more interesting and more valuable things for the business. So I think that's a really exciting thing that's coming.
So you just mentioned AI, and in terms of emerging tech, what do we think is going to have the biggest impact in not just our industry actually, but every industry? And AI is coming at us thick and fast, and the things we can lean into are AI, connected cars. Is there anything else aside from kind of connecting it all up that we should be thinking about? And how can the industry be ready for AI? What should they be thinking about now to get ready for that?
Well, there is one aspect of AI that maybe we should start with, which is actually the agent in the hands of the ultimate customer.
Yeah.
So, I don't know whether you've seen that video on YouTube of an AI assistant, an agent ringing a hotel to make a booking,
Yeah.
and it turns out it's an AI assistant answering the phone, and then they start talking to each other in what sounds like fax machine language. And for those of us old enough to remember that. But look, I don't think it's impossible that consumers themselves will set themselves up with AI assistants to help them to put their car in for a service.
Yeah.
Because it's quite a lot of work. And so maybe that will be the way in which we start to experience it. I think, of course, on top of that, there are a lot of use cases actually in retailers and OEMs as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if customers just start to use AI to help them to navigate complexity.
Like, have my people speak to your people, have my bot speak to your bot.
That's
It's
right.
nuts, isn't it? I haven't actually seen that video, but I am going to watch it. I think it sounds hilarious. Harvey, what about you in terms of AI?
I mean, I think AI is going to be the big thing for like the next, 4 or 5 years. We've got like quantum computing on the rise. We've got artificial generative AI on the rise as well, which will help with like the robotics and manufacturing and all of that, which will be hugely important to the automotive industry. But I think like the here and now is AI and its usage. I think it's something that we all have to spend a considerable amount of time learning about. There are a few newsletters that I follow and make sure that I'm reading constantly, trying to stay up on what's happening. It was interesting. I was at a conference last year, and there was a company that did this presentation about. It wasn't automotive specific. I was actually at more of like a horizontal business conference, but this company helps automotive in terms of their marketing, because if you think about the point in which a customer becomes a lead into a dealership or into a brand, there is a whole life before that exists, that they've been doing their research, they've been talking to friends, they've been reading articles. There's this whole journey that they have gone on to then reach your front door. And it's really interesting to assess that piece of the journey, because where is that journey? Well, it exists on Google. Like, let's say I'm just doing research online. It exists on Google. It exists on Perplexity and Reddit, right? Those are, and probably TikTok a little bit, and like some of those, Instagram, perhaps, Twitter, or X, whatever it is now. But it exists like all way before they've even reached your brand or reached your dealership. And so the question is, well, are you advertising on Reddit? Are you paying attention to the forums that are on Reddit? Are you actually, and this kind of gets into the deep end, but are you training the large language models about your brand and about the cars that you carry and how they can help someone in their car buying journey? Hey, I need a new SUV. I just had a baby. I have this kind of stroller. That into the Google search. Like if you do any research on Google searches lately, the terminology has gone from like 3 or 4 words to like 15 or 20.
Yeah.
So people are just typing like complete sentences in there, expecting a response, and they're getting a response. And most of those responses are now coming from Reddit and Perplexity.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where we need to broaden our scope of what we used to think marketing to a customer was and what it is now, based upon where else they get their information from.
I think SEO's moved on away a little bit.
Just a titch.
Just a bit.
Just a teeny bit.
Yeah.
So you go, we talk about Google, how do people search? And it used to start with a question, like find me, I want to try. Now, I won't type it in. I use my car to dictate messages, and it is hilarious what Siri can hear me talk about. I have to go, no, don't send that. I have to re-say it a couple of times. But I think that's the bit. When you talk about train the language model, so you think about Google LM or ChatGPT, they are basically, again, for the listeners who don't understand what LM is, it's a large language model, which means that it goes and it takes all of that information, learns it as the most giant quantum computing only can, quicker than any human, and then it can find the answers to give you the question to, oh, you had a baby, therefore you're going to need one of these things, and I'll look at all the opinions on Reddit. That one's the favourite. You go, what? So it does it way quicker than you could ever do research.
But you can teach it.
Yes.
That is the other thing. And there are specialist companies that focus in on this. I'm not saying that like anyone in a dealership should be going out and trying to train an LLM, but they are trainable, and they are trainable to understand like what you have to offer a specific market to fit their needs. And so it's no longer like, oh, hey, let's just take out some Facebook ads. It's something quite a bit bigger than that.
You can ask it questions about what car you should have and what it's going to recommend and all.
Yeah.
And that's just going to get smarter.
Yeah. I love can you give me an opinion about this? So, Tom, in your experience of AI then, because it's just, when you say you can train it, in my brain, I think I have a Labrador, I can train that. But get a piece of cheese and a clicker. Yeah, exactly. So what's, just sort of to pick up from that AI topic, it's such a huge, vast kind of, area that people probably still are going, I've just got my brain around digital and now I've got to do what? So it's a big, scary, whole unknown.
Yeah, it's scary, but I think it's moving very fast. That speed is only going to accelerate.
Yeah.
I think if you stand right back, and I know this sounds a little weird thing to say, but like we're right at the beginning of the digital revolution. Like this thing's been going for, 20, 50 years?
Yeah.
Maybe 50 years tops, right?
Yeah.
And we're 500 years on from the invention of the printing press. And this we are right at the beginning of this. There is a lot more to come. It's coming fast at you. So you know what? I think people just got to get comfortable with how can I use this to achieve things which I still think are human things, right? We use information to try to help us to live our lives, and we better if we can. And I know it's scary, and it's a little scary for all of us, but I honestly think the best thing is to keep learning about it. And keep thinking, I wonder how this could help.
Yeah, I have, if I may, I have two newsletters that I follow that I think are really, really great in terms of just giving you news about AI, but also they have a huge database of learning. So you can go in and pick modules. Some of it's more basic, right? It's like, okay, well, wherever I work has Microsoft 365 and now we have Copilot. How do I optimize it? How do I make it help me throughout my day? So one is called Ben's Bites, and that's a really good one. The other one is called The Neuron. And those two newsletters, I think, are the best that I've found that give you weekly updates of what's going on right now. So I don't know if you're aware, but there was this huge release with like Claude 3.7, which is another sort of ChatGPT-esque, and it was worse than 3.5, and then it broke the internet, and like it gives you like all of this information, so you could at least be up to speed a bit with like what's happening, and how people are using AI in a bunch of different ways.
I think the training in tech is sadly lacking in this industry, and that's one of the reasons that we've launched this in the first place, is to try and make it easier for people in the industry to get access to that information so that they are well equipped to know how to use it in their business and everyday life. Thank you so much, Tom and Harvey, for joining me on the very first episode of the Drivetime Podcast. It's been really good fun having you, and I always learn a lot when I speak to you both, so thank you both.
Oh, thanks, Jack. Thanks for having us. It's been really fun.
Thanks, Jackie. It's been really good discussion. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. If you haven't subscribed already, please don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time. And as we all navigate the future of automotive together in this new technical digital world.